And we should be live. Hi, Cynthia. Hello again, Tish, Sarah, Sam, Catherine, Judy, Pam, and everyone that I've missed. So let me know in the chat if you can hear me properly. We've got about exactly 11 minutes to go. Great picture. Good, good. Cool. So welcome everyone. If anyone was watching this on replay in the next few days, if you wanted to skip the hellos, you can skip the next 11 minutes exactly. We're just chatting to each other, waiting for everyone to connect. So we've got 11 minutes. Perfect. Thank you, Sam. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be completely new. If you're completely new to me, let me know. If you want, you don't have to. If you're a bit shy, you don't have to. So it is 20 past 10 now in London, PM. Thank you, Saha. And Mike is here. Welcome, Mike. And Linda. Welcome, Linda. Dinner time. And Matthew is here. Welcome. You're not skipping anything. Good. Oh, perfect, Laurie. Yeah, I used to cut off that, after the tour, I used to cut off that little pre-chat because I thought people watching the replay, they probably don't want to see that. But actually, when you cut it off, then the replay of the chat disappears. So I guess it's probably just better to leave it, because then when you watch the replay, you can have the chat at the same time. And welcome, Michaela. Still the pre-tour, yeah, we still have, let me check that for you, 9 minutes before to start. And welcome, Marilyn. And Teresa, welcome. So we've got about 9 minutes before to start. So you still have time to pop to the loo, to grab yourself a coffee, a pint of gin, or whatever you need to enjoy the show. Extra spooky time, yes. Yeah, I didn't know that either, Sam. I mean, I found out recently because people on Facebook were wondering why do they sometimes have the chat and sometimes they don't. Because usually I leave it on because I think it's nice for people to see, because sometimes I might react to something and, but yeah, because if you cut off those 10 minutes of pre-tour, then the chat would be out of sync, so that's why they just delete it. Well, I suppose the chat is only available on replay when people are watching on a computer anyway, but it's always nice to have it. Yeah, I think it's nice to have it too. And I especially on my Monopoly tours, when I get people to guess the prices, if you then watch it without the chat, it's just a bit odd, because there's no guessing game or anything. Oh, you spent the last 2 hours cleaning. Wow. Well, I hope it's perfectly clean now. First time on this tour. Nice. Let's see if you guys remember. I don't even know if I remember my stuff myself. I've checked it. We didn't do it for 5 months. Yeah, we've got... oops, what did I do? 7 minutes. And thank you, Mike. I think I just got a coffee. If you guys buy me a coffee or anything, I don't get notification live when I'm on this, but I've accidentally clicked on the email notification to see the time. So we've got, what did I say? 7 minutes. That's the thing with Prism. It doesn't actually tell me the time. And Julie is here. Chilly in town tonight. Yeah, it's. I think it's. According to Google, it's 7 degrees Celsius, but feeling like 3 or 4. So it's quite cold. And Lorraine is here. Welcome, Lorraine, from Ontario. That was your first Hego too. Yeah. Just in case, if you're watching this and you have no idea what Hego is, that was a streaming platform on which I used to stream before to end up on YouTube. It was a COVID business that sadly went down just a year ago now, nearly a year ago. Welcome Manimo49. Nice having you here. Do we have any newbies? Anyone completely new to me in the chat? Let me know if you've never seen any of my lives before. Hi Tracy. You were on every single one of them, Tish. I don't even know how many I did. But I think I've done it quite a few times. So we've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes before to start, so we still have plenty of time to get to know each other. You still miss Hego. Laurie, this was my very first Hego tour. Yeah. Fully booked. 200 people. Yeah. You wonder how much a 1-bedroom flat would cost? Oh, in Victorian times. Oh, that would have been such a different price. Yeah, I wouldn't know, but yeah, I miss Beams as well. Well, although I had stopped Beams when Hego stopped us. Yeah, I think you could rent, at the time of the Ripper, you could rent a room for about 4 shillings a week, whatever that means. But in terms of buying, I have no idea. Maybe Kosminski in the 10 Bells. If you guys don't know who Kosminski is, I'm not gonna explain it now. Because before to tell you about the suspects, I need to tell you about the murders, and we need to dive back into Victorian times first. Right, let me see what time it is. 3 minutes. We've got 3 minutes to chat away. You just had an ad, yeah. Unfortunately, it has to be. It's not, well, it's out of our control. I mean, I say unfortunately, it's good for me. It does bring me a tiny little bit of income, but to be honest, it's completely insignificant. I mean, I surely completely need to rely on your tips, you know. One day I might get thousands of viewers, but at the moment it's really, it's not gonna pay the bills. 12, Laurie. So 12 penny is a shilling. 12 shilling is a pound. I think that's it, yeah. That's where you can see older people that use, they used to count on, you know, when we go 1, 2, 3, hold on, I'm not in frame. We go 1, 2, 3, we count with our finger. They used to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even the Romans would do that, because then you'd have 12. So it's quite easy to divide anything by 12. How could you convinced it's Charles Lechmere? I'll mention him a bit later. Personally, I'm not convinced. I think he's definitely a good suspect because he was definitely at the scene of the crime, for one of them at least. But let's not go too far into the suspects yet, because I need to tell you about the murders first. But it's always the same thing with those Ripper suspects. There are so many people that are absolutely fascinated by the case. You can pretty much build a case against anybody, well, any Victorian man, and you could read a new book, watch a new documentary, listen to a new podcast, and they can make the case so convincing that you'd be like, yeah, I bet it's that one. And then you watch another documentary and you're like, oh, hold on, I think it's that one. So yeah, I think I'm quite happy with the conclusion that we will never know. You're flying over to England next week. Are you gonna stop here, or is it just a quick stop over Wendy? And welcome, Marianne. Nice to have you here. Yes, it's sad. We'll probably never know. Hi, down. And Pisas is here. Welcome. No hat today. Don't get too used to it, though. I'm already feeling uncomfortable because I need to move my hair away. Yeah, I'd love to go to Iceland. And I've never been because it's quite pricey over there. And Michelle is here as well. Welcome, Michelle. Let me check the time. And it is officially time to start. It is past. Let me gracefully stand up. So welcome, everyone. And just in case, if anyone was new to me, I'm Natalie. We are live from London. It is 10:30 p.m. on a Sunday night. And you've got the chat. Feel free to use it. Ask me any questions you might have. I might know or I might not know, but I'll try. And if I've missed any of your questions, don't get offended. Sometimes the chat goes a bit too quick for me. And let's go. Let me flip this and let's get started. So we are in the area of Spitalfields. And we're here to talk about Jack the Ripper, of course. But first, we need to try to dive back into Victorian times. And welcome, Sandrine, and welcome everyone that I've missed. So we are here exactly at the border of the City of London. When I say the city, I mean the city with a capital C. See the street name up there? Whitegate Street. Just above the name, you might see a little crest. That is the crest of the City of London. It's only one of our 32 districts, our 32 boroughs. And it's the oldest one. That's what the Romans would have called Londinium. Now, it doesn't make a massive difference, but in the City of London, you don't have that many inhabitants. It's mainly offices, and they have their own police forces and their own mayor. That means that if I was to commit a little crime to my right over here, I'll have to deal with the City of London police. A little crime or just a little graffiti. And if I did it to my left, you might see above the street name here, Artillery Passage. You don't see the crest anymore because that is outside of the City of London. So there'll be a different police force. If I committed a crime here, I'll have to deal with the Met, the Metropolitan Police. Now, London has changed quite a lot since Victorian times. But I decided to start here because really this little street, Artillery Passage, it's one of the only streets that really kept its Victorian atmosphere. With all those little shops and lampposts. The Victorian shops were often very deep because you'd come inside and you'd have a counter. You'd be served. Even if you wanted to come and order a dress, for example, they'll have the workshop at the back, so they'll have to take your measurement and they'll make it on the spot. That's when, of course, in France they started the prêt-à-porter, but otherwise you'd have the workshop at the back. And a lot of the traders would come outside on the street. For example, the butchers they used to come out on the street to chop the meat right here on the streets to grab some attention. So often they'll be very loud, and they'll chop the meat with all the pigeon dropping and everything on the meat. We had quite a few butchers around here because there were a lot of slaughterhouses here. And that meant that if late at night you spotted a man with a bit of blood on his outfit, you wouldn't necessarily be massively worried, because he might be a butcher finishing his shifts and going home. And I'm going to turn around to give you another angle of the street. When we talk about Victorian times, you probably imagine gentleman with a top hat and a big cape. Hi, Lethargy, welcome. Ladies with beautiful dresses and beautiful hats and a tiny, tiny little waist, on horse carriages and all that. Yes, in Westminster. Over here in the East End, it was extremely populated, extremely poor. We're right next to the docks, so a lot of people had very badly paid jobs at the docks, and it was really overly populated and full of homelesses. So the gentlemen with the top hats, you wouldn't see that many around here. If they did come, though, if they came on a street like this with their wife with the beautiful dresses, often the wife would be walking very close to the wall and the gentleman a bit more towards the middle. That is because at the time we did not have the sewage system yet. Well, it was starting in Westminster, not quite here yet, so you'd still have some chamber pots. And those chamber pots, they had to be emptied. Some people had a cesspit, but some people would just dump them on the streets. We have a few expressions that come from those days. One of them you might have heard. If you are from the UK or if you have visited before, you might know when we're going to the toilets here, we call it the loo. That is because back in the days, a lot of people from the aristocracy, they spoke French for a very long time, after William the Conqueror and all that. This beautiful building, that's one of those Georgian shops, by the way. It looks a bit Harry Potterish. So yeah, a lot of people spoke French, and before to dump those chamber pots through the windows, they used to shout, "Garde à l'eau, garde à l'eau." It's old French for "mind the water." It was not exactly water, of course. It was literally human waste. And over the years, garde à l'eau, it became the loo. So that's why here we call it the loos. And we have another expression that comes from there as well. Apologies, it's not very polite, but I'm going to let you know anyway, because why not? When you get a bit intoxicated, you might say, "Oh, I'm shit-faced." This is because, people that were sober, when they heard garde à l'eau, they used to hide away. People that were drunk, some of them would look up, and they would quite literally get, shit-faced. And the gentlemen with the top hats, those top hats, they were actually full of mercury to make them waterproof, because we didn't have any waterproofing products yet. And of course, we know now that mercury is absolutely terrible for the brain. So those hatters, handling the mercury all day, they used to get a bit mad. So that's how we got the expression "mad as a hatter," like in Alice in the Wonderland. Lewis Carroll, by the way, he was also a Jack the Ripper suspect. Not a very good one at all, if you ask me, but he was on the list. Anyway, you might be able to read, it's a bit dark, but above the gate here it reads "woman." That is because that would have been the entrance for the ladies into a night shelter. Now, the night shelters, this one was managed by Catholic nuns, but they were quite similar to the workhouses. The workhouses, they were those accommodations for the very poor. In Victorian times, they did not treat the poor very nicely. they almost consider being poor like a sin, you know. You might have seen or read Oliver Twist, you know, when at the beginning he's in one of them and he dares to ask for more food. That's why you have the entrance for women, because in Oliver Twist he is in the part for the kids. So they would split the families. So if really you could not feed your kids, if really you couldn't put a roof over your head, you could not even sell your body, the very last thing you could do was to come here at the workhouse. See, today it's a student accommodation, probably at least 1,500 a month, so quite a big contrast with what it used to be. So you'd come here, you'd queue, they'll force you to take a bath in some kind of like a barrel of water that would have been used by 50 people before you. Then they'll give you a bed. Well, I say a bed, it's more like a wooden box, looking very much like a coffin, really. And then the next day you'd have to work, at least a good 12 hours, very difficult manual jobs to pay for your stay, basically. So quite a hard place to live. Some claim that our last victim for tonight spent a bit of time here, but there's no evidence of that. And yeah, so you didn't want to live here, but you did not want to die in here. Because what happened is at the beginning of the 19th century, there was a massive demand for human bodies because they wanted them for the dissections. You know, there were a lot of students, and it was the beginning of medicine as we know it today, really. So the surgeons, they had to learn. And at the time, the only bodies that were given to science were the bodies from the executions. There were some, but not enough, really, you know. And also the bodies that were executed were often similar profiles. You know, you didn't have any kids or pregnant ladies, or very, very few, luckily. So that's why we had a problem with body snatchers, people going to the graveyards and the cemeteries to steal the newly buried bodies and to sell them to the anatomist. And that became so bad that in 1832, the church decided that the people that died in those workhouses, those prisons, those poorhouses, their bodies would be given to science. So for them it was an absolute no-no, because they believed that if they were not buried properly, they wouldn't be able to reach heaven. So for them it was the very worst thing that could happen to them, to die penniless in those workhouses. I love those old signs like the Donovan Bros here. That home sold for 2 million a year ago. And so yeah, so that was for the, talking about the surgeons, by the way, the ones doing the anatomies and stuff, at the School of Medicine in Smithfield, so less than a mile from here, they had in 1888 a gentleman from America that contacted them. He wanted to buy some uteruses. He offered £20. That's a lot of money at the time. The School of Medicine said no. Yeah, I know, interesting detail to remember for later. Yeah, great ghost sign. The company still runs, though, not from here, but the Donovan Bros, they still run. Anyway, see the pub here, the Gun? About a month and a half ago, when the 10 bells went on the market, some of you posted on my Facebook group, oh, the 10 bells is for sales. Well, this pub here, the Gun, was also for sales. It's the same company that runs it. And the Gun also has a connection to murder. The original one was a bit further down the road, like 100 yards down. And in very early Victorian times, they bought a dog. The dog that did not bark through the murder of Eliza Grimwood. You might remember my tour of Waterloo. I should redo it at some point soon. So that's, I don't know if that one is still on the market. The 10 bells was taken, the ad was taken down. So I'm guessing it's been sold. I don't know if the Gun has been sold yet. Anyway, back to the Ripper. a lot of you have seen this tour before, but we never know, we might have a few newbies. Do you know, or do you care to guess how many victims Jack the Ripper had? How many have they killed in total? I say they because, of course, it could be a lady or it could be a few people. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, there are no strong, irrevocable evidence that Jack the Ripper was definitely a man. It could have been Jacqueline the Ripper or Jill the Ripper. So how many do you think they've killed? 14, says Sam. That could be true. 6, says Pam. 11, says Sarah. Well, quite a few of you are spot on. Exactly, Sandrine. Yeah, the truth is, of course, we don't know. He's never been caught, of course, so we will never know how many lives they claimed. Most tripologists agree on 5 at least. Personally, I would say 6, if not 7. But, well, actually, it could be 5, because I'm not convinced Elizabeth Stride was really one of them. So at least 5, yeah. There was a victim a little bit earlier called Martha Tabram. She was also what we called overkilled. She had been stabbed 39 times, a lot of those stabbing in the abdomen and the genitalia. So personally, I think she might be a victim of the Ripper as well. But we don't know. Tonight, we'll focus on the 5 canonical ones. In the autumn of 1888, the Metropolitan Police was actually investigating 11 suspicious deaths. And there may have been a few copycats in America. Well, there have been a few copycats in America, but could they have been the same killer? We don't know. So anything above 5, really. But tonight we'll only focus on the 5 canonical ones. So that is Pauline Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Katherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Oh yes, Laurie, there were a few. There were a couple of at least one very similar murder in Manhattan, very similar to Mary Kelly, that could lead to a suspect I personally quite agree with, which is Klosowski, George Chapman. But yeah, there were a few. Anyway. Our victims, you might have heard that they were sex workers. The truth is, we don't know that. Out of the 5, 2 of them had definitely sold their bodies at one point or another. It doesn't mean that they were definitely soliciting that very night, the night of their murders. The 3 others, they might have, but there's no evidence of it. They could have been into casual prostitution, but we don't know that for sure. At the time, the Metropolitan Police always assumed that any ladies outside late at night were definitely what they would have called unfortunate. So that was another term for prostitutes, really. The thing is, those ladies were almost all of them homelesses, and all of them definitely alcoholics. Oh, thank you ever so much, Natalie. And the 5 of them probably drunk in that pub, the 10 Bells. Well, my Jane Kelly was there the very night of her killing. So the 10 Bells pub is very much associated with the Ripper story. So much so that in the 70s, they renamed it the Jack the Ripper. But it didn't look very good to have a pub named after a serial killer, so they went back to the 10 Bells. And if you see the little plaque on the left-hand side with a bell, most of the pubs here would have something like that, an illustration of their names. That is because, remember, back in the day, a lot of people did not know how to read and write properly. So if I gave you a meeting at the 10 Bells, we had at the time, a lot of them are closing down now, but at the time we had a pub at every street corner. So just to make sure you were at the right place, if you didn't know how to read, you'll check the illustration. And let me cross over. So the 10 bells is very much connected to the murders because the victims came, and potentially the Ripper himself, whoever they were, but also because it is haunted. Now, there are a lot of pubs in London that claim to be haunted. Some of them even use their ghost as a marketing value. But this very pub here, it's the only one where I personally had a weird experience. For many years I heard that if you went to the loo, you went to the ladies, if you looked at your reflection in the mirror, you might see a tall lady behind you wearing a green dress. Some say that would fit the description of Lucky Lizzie. Now, Lucky Lizzie, she's the third victim. Now, you might ask me, if she's a Jack the Ripper victim, why is she lucky? Well, she's so-called lucky because she's the only one of the 5 that was not disassembled. Most of the victims would have been cut open very quickly on a dark street, from the anus to the breast, some of their organs removed, most of the uteruses were gone, and Elizabeth was not. She was found in a little courtyard. We believe that it might be because the killer was interrupted and he had to run away, where he struck again with Katherine Eddowes. That's where we'll finish the tour in a moment on Katherine's site. So the night of the double event. Whether Lizzie indeed is a Ripper victim or not, I don't know. What I do know is one day after finishing this tour, I went into the pub to take a photo in the toilets because the ghost is in the toilet, so I wanted to show you what it looked like. So I took a photo. I'll show you the image. And that's what it looked like. The mirror looks very dirty because it is a fake mercury mirror. I suppose the pub probably plays with it because it's very easy to have a drunken hallucination. You can see how old the photo is because I have my COVID mask. But you might see in the background, it looks like there's a lady behind me. I don't know. I mean, it could be some kind of a double reflection. I don't know. But yeah, could it be Elizabeth? Or could it be any other ghost? I mean, they probably have a fair share. It's a very old pub. It is named the 10 Bells after the bells into the church. The church behind me, Christ Church of Spitalfields. Very sadly, at the time of the Ripper, the little graveyard here at night was full of homelesses, full of gentlemen and ladies sleeping rough on the graves. It's because at the time the Metropolitan Police did not let them sleep on the pavement. They'd be kicked away. So the only places where they could sleep were graveyards or courtyards. And so yeah, sadly a lot of them had to sleep on the graves. You'd say there's definitely a lady behind me. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have noticed if I didn't know, but what a coincidence. It's the same story as I had heard for many years, you know, in the toilet, a lady behind you. So Matthew is asking, is it safe walking in Whitechapel by myself? Yes, Matthew. This area did not have the best reputation until maybe, I don't know, the beginning of the 90s maybe, but now I find it very safe. And I have a camera, I'm live, so if anyone was to attack me, I've got quite a few witnesses. You could take a screenshot of their faces, so we're fine. Thank you ever so much, Linda. Right, I'm pointing at the building across the street now. There's not much to see today, but back in the autumn of 1888, that would have been the entrance to Dorset Street. Now, Dorset Street was known as the most dangerous street in London. Even the police officers, they didn't want to go alone. They only went down there if it was 4 of them together. And at the back of Dorset Street, you had a place called Miller's Court. At number 13, that is where our last victim used to live. Mary Jane, or Marie Jeannette. She liked to be called Marie-Jeannette. She had been trafficked to France, sadly, and it's probably when she came back from France that she took that alias. She was from Ireland or Wales, depending who you ask. She's potentially the most mysterious of the five, and she's also the youngest. And she's the only victim that was found indoors. Most of the other victims would have been killed very quickly, in a very short period of time on a dark street. That's why some people have assumed that the killer might have been a doctor or a butcher, because it was done very quickly in the dark. Removing organs in the dark with a clear cut, it's difficult, you know. But with Mary Jane, he had all the time in the world because he got inside her little accommodation. So he had all the time to do his weirdest fantasies. And I have decided not to show you any photographs of the post-mortem in my tours, because I thought if I was going to be murdered myself, I wouldn't really want photos of my naked, disassembled body to be exposed on YouTube 135 years later. But if you are curious, you can just Google them. You'll find the five of them with their names on Google. And the crime scene, that was one of the first crime scene photographs of history. And it was a butchery. You had blood all over the room. Not only had she been disassembled, but she was partially skinned. The skin had been folded and placed on the bedside table. You couldn't even recognize her face. He had cut off the nose and destroyed her face. And a hurt was never to be found. One could see a significance behind it. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, we are now on Fournier Street. So Fournier, very French name. And it is for me the opportunity to tell you about the different waves of immigration that really shaped this area of Spitalfields. And one of them were the French. Well, the Huguenots. The Huguenots, they were the French Protestant. We had some war religions in France, and the Protestants were not treated very well. We had the Saint Barthélemy's massacre, and a lot of them immigrated, not only to the UK, they went everywhere, but some came to London and they settled here. A lot of them were in the weaving industry. So that was the first wave. And if you see up there, you might see the street name. It is written, of course, in English, but also in Bengali, because the last wave of immigration were people from Bangladesh in the 60s. Because when the British Empire left India on this part of the globe, they kind of made random borders, and people didn't have the same religion, the same culture. Bangladesh was East Pakistan at first, and there were some massacres there as well. So they came here for a better life. And we had another wave of immigration in the 1880s. A lot of people from the Jewish community. So that's what really shaped this area into being so different from the rest of London. It's all those different waves of immigration. Yes, exactly, Candace. It was one of the first, I think it might have been the first crime scene photograph on the spot. The French had already done it in Lyon, Naked Lady as well. But it was not the actual crime scene. They had recreated it. They had posed her. So I think Mary Kelly was the first one that was actually taken on the spot as it happened. Yeah. This beautiful street is been used for many movies. You might have seen the BBC series Luther. There's a character that lives in that house here. In the movie Suffragettes, there's a scene where they are on top of the roofs there. And Annie Chapman was found over here. Well, little disclaimer, she was not found here. She was found on the parallel, 29 Hanbury Street. But the building has been destroyed. It doesn't look the same anymore. So I'm going to show you this one here because it would have looked very similar. This building here is not been refurbished because they keep it for, they rent it for movies and stuff. So that's why it looks very, very old. Now, in this poor part of London, some poor Victorian families would live cramped all together in one little bedroom. You could imagine a family of 9 living in a tiny bedroom. There was no space for privacy. You could have up to 50 people living in a home like this. You can imagine in one bedroom a teenage daughter cooking lunch next to a little brother taking a poo in a chamber pot, next to the parents making more babies. No privacy whatsoever. And that little door there, very often it led into a little courtyard. And that door would have been left open at night because well, as we mentioned earlier, we didn't really have the sewage system. So you had a gentleman called the night soilman coming to empty the cesspit or collect human waste. Very horrible job, but good money for Victorian standards. So the ladies of the night, as well as the homeless, they would have known that the doors were left open. And did Annie go in there with a customer as a sex worker, or did she go in there to sleep? We cannot tell for sure. There was an eyewitness that did claim seeing Annie talking to a gentleman just before 5 a.m. And according to what they said, he said, "Will you?" She said yes. Now, I wouldn't trust the eyewitnesses too much on the Ripper story because in the middle of the night in Whitechapel, quite frankly, everyone was drunk. And a lot of them were a bit anti-Semitist anyway. So, you know, they always described them as looking like a foreigner or, you know. But yeah, there were a couple of eyewitnesses that didn't even resemble one another. Now, Annie was found at 5:30 a.m. in the courtyard. It was already bright, so she's the only victim that was found at daytime, really. And it was Annie. Some of her friends came to identify her. Annie was, I think she was 47. She suffered from tuberculosis, so she would have been dead fairly quickly anyway. And she found herself homeless. She's the only one that had a background almost middle class, really, but she fell on hard times. And when she was found, she was missing a couple of items. She was missing 2 little rings. That was very unusual because she was homeless. She used to carry with her everything she owned. So it's not like if she could have left them at home. She had no home. And they were not valuable. They were not silver or nothing. Her boyfriend had given it to her. So that was a little bit unusual. She was also missing a couple of teeth. But that's not surprising. She had got into a fight a few days earlier with another lady over a bar of soap. Look at those amazing windows. All those buildings here are protected for their historical heritage. So yes, she had got into a fight over a bar of soap. And the other lady, she was even more damaged than Annie was. So when I talk about those ladies, really, I don't want you to imagine them physically vulnerable. Well, they might be because they might have been hungry, they might have been sick. But really, those ladies were used to fighting. They were used to getting drunk and they were used to arguing so yeah, don't imagine them too vulnerable because clearly they were ready to fight. That's why personally I think it's actually very possible that Annie was sleeping when the Ripper came, in which case she wouldn't have even time to fight back. Who knows? Anyway, we are now on the famous Brick Lane. So if you come to London, that's an amazing place for restaurants. If you fancy a bit of Asian food, amazing food here. Today it's actually a very pricey area. Well, London is expensive everywhere, but it's very trendy now. Did I say earlier that the last wave of immigration was people from Bangladesh? Actually, no. The last wave of immigration, that's the hipsters. They came about 15 years ago with their tattoos and vintage shoes. And and quinoa salads. And today it's actually very trendy and very expensive to live. This beautiful building here, you might see a minaret at the top. It is the only building that I know in the UK that has been through the 3 Abrahamic religions. It used to be a Huguenot church, so Protestants. Then it became a synagogue, and now it is a mosque, so it's quite cool. And it's a listed building, so inside you still have some writings in Hebrew. They're not allowed to change it because it's protected for its historical importance. So today, very expensive. If you wanted a bedroom here, it's probably 1,500 a month for a flat share, minimum. Some of them are like 2K. But back in Victorian times, it was a slum. It was overly populated, extremely poor, and you had a lot of dust houses. The dust houses, they were those accommodations for the very poor, like a youth hostel today, but instead of having 10 people in a room, you might have had like 30. And a bed would cost you 4 penny. To give you an idea, 4 penny, it is about the same price as a pint of gin, because they used to drink gin by the pint or the half pint. Or it would also be the price of the job of a prostitute in a dark corner. So for those ladies, it was often a vicious cycle. You know, they'd get the 4 penny, soliciting or sometimes even begging, but then they'll drink it away in a pint of gin, and then they'll have to get the 4 penny again. Now, when I say a bed, let me show you a photo of the bed, because it's not exactly what I'll call a bed. It looks more like a coffin. So this is the type of beds you'd get with 4 penny. And bear in mind, you'd be sleeping with another maybe 30, people coughing, people itching, probably bed bugs and everything. So that's what you'd get for 4 penny. Let me show you what you'd get if you didn't have the 4 penny. I'll show you. So if you didn't have those 4 penny, you could get the rope. I'll show you the rope. That's what you could get. Now, I know it's extremely sad, and to be honest, it's quite shocking that it's hard to imagine that this is actually better than sleeping on the streets. But remember, they couldn't really sleep on the pavements. They'll be kicked away. So the only places where they could sleep were courtyards and graveyards. So yeah, they could get the rope for 2 penny. Let me remove it. We are now by Fashion Street. Fashion Street, still today, it's actually a lot of fashion studios. It was already the case in Victorian times. You had a lot of Jewish tailors around here. On Brick Lane, to give you an idea, in 1888, there were 27 Jewish tailors. So yeah, those poor ladies, they were used to sleeping on the streets. And did they sell their bodies or not? For most of them, we'll never know. But, you know, if you are unwell, you're suffering from tuberculosis, you're freezing, you have no food, if that could get you a night in a warm bed, well, yes, they might have done some casual prostitution as well. But does it define them? I don't think so. And let's go to see where the first victim, well, the first of the 5, Polly Nichols. Let's go and see where she spent her last night. She was drinking the night away. She had been spending the previous 2 weeks in a lodging house here, a lodging house for ladies only. If she was indeed a sex worker, why would she stay in a lodging house only for ladies? But yeah, she had stolen from her employer, so she had a bit of money. Unfortunately, that was gone after 2 weeks, and that night she drank it away. She was drinking in this very pub here. It's no longer a pub now; it's a new Chinese noodle takeaway. It's very new. I've not even been. It's like literally just 6 months ago now. But you can still see. Let me show you the top. You can still see. The top is quite typical of those Victorian pubs with the engraving at the top. So she was drinking here when, to be honest, she did get completely intoxicated. And she went back down this way to the lodging house where she stayed, but she was penniless. The lodging house owner, he said to her, "No, Polly, you know the drill, no pay, no stay." Now, he was not being mean. I mean, it's not a charity, it's a business. He had a business to run. It's not like if he could welcome all the drunken ladies, he had a business. So he said no. And she famously replied, "Don't worry, look at my jolly bonnet, I'll soon get my dust money." So the dust money, the money for the dust house. That phrase has been used to prove that she was a prostitute. Personally, I don't think that proves anything. She could have meant, "I've got a jolly bonnet, I'm going to solicit." Yeah. She could have meant, "I've got a jolly bonnet, I'm cute, I'm going to beg, I'll get more money." Or she could have meant, "I've got a jolly bonnet, I'm going to sell it and get the money." So we'll never know. What we do know is that she did not come back. She was found brutally murdered a few streets away in a place called Bucks Row. And the gentleman that found it, one of you, I know you're a big believer that he's actually the Ripper. You were telling me in the chat earlier. It's a guy called Charles Cross, or Charles Lechmere. Now, Lechmere was on his way to work when officially he spotted a pile of rags on the floor. So he was like, yeah. Because at the time, fabrics and the items of clothing were much more valuable than they are today. Because you could sell it. Even a pile of rags, you could sell it and make money. And Lechmere was like, yeah. He got a bit closer and he realized it was not a pile of rags. Sadly, it was a lady. She had been brutally attacked, and when he's leaning, he's not actually leaning, he's just over her, because there's a documentary about the case where they do when you watch a documentary, sometimes they're really convincing, but he was not really leaning over her, because they do some kind of a sketch. It looks like he's really over her, like in the process of killing her. Apparently that was not the case. When you go back to the facts, so the other guy came behind him, and the other guy was like, "Oh, let's sit her up." And Lechmere said no, he refused to touch her. If he was indeed the killer, if he had been interrupted in the process of killing her, don't you think he would have wanted to touch her? To have an excuse to have some blood on himself, So personally, I'm not 100% convinced that. I mean, clearly the police didn't really see Lechmere as a great suspect at the time, Modern ripologists do, and he was definitely on the scene of the crime, but who knows? Is one of the many suspects, but who knows? By the way, I didn't even tell you how we got the name Jack the Ripper, because at the beginning of the inquiry, he was known as the Whitechapel murderer. The name itself actually came from the letters. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee that had been created, as well as the police and the journalists, they used to get a lot of letters claiming to be from the killer. Most of them were hoaxes. Some of them were completely ridiculous, like someone in Wales would have an argument with their neighbours and they'll write to the police saying, "My neighbour is Jack the Ripper." And the police had to follow any leads, really. But a couple... Sorry, it's a bit noisy, I'm going to wait. A couple of those letters might have been genuine. And one of them was signed Jack the Ripper. So that's how we got the name. And so it could be anybody, really. It's just a name from the letter. One of the letters, by the way, was not a letter but a package, a little package with half a kidney inside, and the letter read, "I've eaten the other half for dinner, ha ha ha." at the time, the pathologists were not really, they were not even 100% sure that it was human. But the press made a mistake and they published that it was, not only was it human, but it was from a lady that suffered from Bright's disease. Now, Katherine Eddowes, that's the lady we'll go and see the crime scene now, she indeed suffered from some kidney disease. But even if, because even if it was a bad joke from a student in anatomy, for example, if they had got a kidney from the dissections, the body would have probably come from the workhouse or from the prisons, where a lot of those ladies are alcoholic anyway. So the kidney would have very probably suffered from Bright's disease anyway. So it really doesn't prove anything at all. And I'm gonna cross over here. And in terms of suspects, well, we don't have time to mention the 300 of them tonight, so I'm gonna try to stick to 3. And one suspect that I have to mention. Now I was gonna be naughty, but no, it's not green yet. I'll be a good girl. One suspect I have to mention is Kosminski. He's not my favorite at all, but he ticks all the boxes. The thing we know now about the serial killers is that they don't stop for no reason. They go crescendo and crescendo until they are, caught, dead, or locked in, whether it is a prison or an asylum, something that physically stops them. Kosminski was, there were actually quite a few Kosminski in the area, but if it is the one we think it is, he was locked into an asylum. He was what they would have called at the time a lunatic. He was addicted to masturbation. He had worked as a barber. Now that's interesting as well, because the barbers at the time, they had some knowledge of anatomy. They were doing some mini surgeries. You know, you'd have a verruca on your face. You wanted your verruca cut off. You'd go to the barbers. You wanted a teeth pulled out. You didn't go to the dentist. You went to the barbers. So, you know, because we think the killer might have had some basics of anatomy, he could have been a barber. He could have been a butcher. Because of course, the anatomy of a pig is not that different from the anatomy of a human. There was another suspect that was a butcher, Jacob Levy, that also ended up in an asylum. So that's why Kosminski and Levy have to be on my list. It's because they had a reason to have physically stopped. And there's no strong evidence against any of them, but Kosminski, he had sexually assaulted his own sister. He lived very locally. That is a thing as well that, according to most tripologists, even the profilers, even the FBI had a go at profiling a suspect. By the way, guys, the chat has been very quiet. Are you still here? I don't know if it's just very interesting or if I've lost the chat. So even every single profilers, they said that the suspect would have lived very locally. Well, lived or worked. But however, he would have known this area like the back of his hand. I think I've lost the chat. Hopefully it will come up, but I don't see any of your messages anymore. It happens sometimes. Hopefully it'll come up. I hope you're still here. I still see the number, so I think you're still here. Let's keep going. And whoever he was, it's all coming down now. Good. I get all the messages in one go. I think it was just stuck for a minute. Thank you. And the suspects. Some of the suspects were from the Jewish community, which is not unusual because there were a lot of people from the Jewish community here. We are now on the street of the Petticoat Lane Market. Today it's not called it's not called Petticoat Lane anymore because apparently Queen Victoria found it a little bit too titillating. But still today, it's a market today. And at the time, a lot of the traders were from the Jewish community. Now, you might have heard the theory that Jack the Ripper himself was Jewish. There's a reason why people have said that. It is because of the famous non-clue. After finding the body of Katherine Eddowes, the body, I'll show you in a moment where it was found, but about an hour and a half later, they found right here in front of the gate here a little piece of her apron. Her apron was cut off, that's for sure. The apron was identified as belonging to Katherine, the victim. It was found right here inside that little gate. It was full of blood and feces. We don't know why the Ripper took it. Probably just to clean his knife, or maybe did he cut himself, or did he use it to carry the kidney and the uterus he had stolen from her? We don't know. What we do know is that just above the apron, there was a little graffito written on the wall just here. It was written with chalk, and it read, "The Jewess won't be the man to be blamed for nothing." Now, it said the Jewess. It did not spell the Jews. So if that person was trying to be anti-Semitist, or if they probably just didn't know how to spell it, or maybe they didn't mean the Jews at all. And there's another mistake here. Won't be blamed for nothing. That's a double negation. We don't do that in English. We do in some languages, like French or Yiddish. So, personally, I think it's very unfair to assume that it came from the killer. There was probably quite a few graffitis that were anti-Semitist in the area anyway. And the building on which it was written was 98% Jewish, so anyone could have written that. And I don't think when you run away from a murder that you really take the time to do a graffiti, but what do I know? To do a graffito, I should say, because graffiti is plural, so to do a graffito. And the Metropolitan Police, they actually erased it before the city police could take a photograph of it. They were trying to protect the residents. They did not want to rise up the anti-Semitism in the area. But of course, one might call it tampering with evidence. They did erase it, so that raised a few suspicions as well. Let me show you some street art. The rat up there, it's from an artist called Roa. And this is probably one of the longest standing pieces of street art that I know in London. It's been here for many years because it is Ripper related. And of course, every single day, many Ripper tours come around here. And this is the piece of street art I like the least. Your tour guide is lying to you. No, I don't. Well, I try not to. Sometimes, sometimes there are stories that are just too good not to be told. But when I know they're not true, I usually tell you. And this beautiful piece of street art here, the right inside, it's from an artist called Zabu. The left inside, it's Jimmy C. You might recognize the style. He's doing like little pointillism. He's from Australia originally, so he's doing like the Aborigine technique. And Zabu, she's a French artist. Anyway, we are now entering the city of London again. That's why we just mentioned the two police forces. So the famous non-clue was under the patch of the Metropolitan Police. But the murder victim herself, she was the only one that was killed in the city of London. See straight ahead, see those little pillars there? When you see the red little stars on a white background, that's the city of London. And again, you can see the little crest up here again, the crest we've seen at the beginning of the tour. So that signifies that you are back in the city. Are you coming to a Ripper tour in London in September? Nice, hope you enjoy it. And so yeah, the suspect I think has to be on the list is Klosowski. Kosminski. Well, Klosowski as well, but I was not going to talk about him. That's Chapman. That's a different suspect. I do a full tour about him. And another suspect that I have to mention, not because it's very believable, but because it's a very good story. It is, of course, the royal conspiracy. Who doesn't like a royal conspiracy? We've had quite a few of them in the last few weeks, particularly in Northern America. Some of them are not really. The press here is a little bit more respectful to of the royals. But yeah, we've seen, especially in recent weeks, that everyone likes a good royal conspiracy. Well, we've got one with Jack the Ripper as well. Talking about the hairdressers earlier. See these little signs here? So that's for the hairdressers, the white and red, because the hairdressers, as we mentioned, they used to do surgery. So they often had those bloody bandages to dry out outside, you know. So that's why the white and red. Later on, they added the blue to differentiate between the barber's surgeon and the barber's barber. Anyway, back to the royals. So the royal conspiracy here, it's about Prince Eddie. Eddie, his actual name was Victor Albert, because the royals, they actually choose their names. So Victor Albert was the grandson of Queen Victoria, the first one. So in the line of succession, he was like the little George today. And he was, he was a bit different. Even Victoria herself, she had some doubt about his intellect. And it is said that he liked prostitutes. Now, there were some quite fancy sex workers in Westminster, you know, some very luxurious one. But it is said that he liked the ones from Whitechapel. And that he would have secretly fallen in love with one of them and secretly married her. Then she would have fallen pregnant. Now, that baby should have been the heir to the throne. And some say that some of the ladies, and particularly Mary Jane Kelly, got aware of the royal baby and that they were blackmailing the royal family. It is very far-fetched. There's no evidence of any of that. But some say that Queen Victoria herself would have asked her physician, Sir William Gull, to eliminate the 4 prostitutes that were aware of the royal baby. Because we couldn't have an heir to the throne that was the son of a sex worker. Sir William Gull, you might have seen the movie with Johnny Depp, you know, From Hell. It's a nice fairy, but Sir William Gull was in his 70s. He had had a stroke and was partially paralyzed. Do you think he would really have had the strength to attack a lady like Annie Chapman that was ready to punch? I'm not convinced, personally. Some say that it was not William Gull, that it was Prince Eddie himself, that he had sadly got contaminated by syphilis. And syphilis, you might know, it's got different stages, and it was very common in Victorian times. We're talking about 15% of the population being contaminated, and of course a lot of the sex workers as well. And after many years, it can attack your brain. It goes as neuronal syphilis, and some of the symptoms might be quite quite bad. You'd look like what they would have called at the time a lunatic, and you could act erratically. So some say that Prince Eddie himself became extremely violent, and he wanted to have a revenge, and then he decided to kill some sex workers because they would have contaminated him. Now, again, nice story, but Prince Eddie he's got an alibi anyway. Through one of the murders, he was actually in Balmoral with Queen Victoria. He was having dinner with her. So not very possible, but nice story, and of course that makes a nice movie. If you've not seen From Hell with Johnny Depp, it's quite good. Even just to see Victorian London, it's quite well done. Inspector Abeline is a drug addict. Anyway, see the church here? This is St. Botolph without Aldgate. And at the time of the Ripper, it was known as the Prostitute Church or the Prostitute Island, because it was like on an island between the streets. At night it was full of prostitutes, because again we are at the border between the City of London and the rest, so different jurisdiction, and also because the prostitution was of course illegal, but let's say that there were a couple of rules that they had to abide by. The authorities were well aware that it was going to happen anyway, so the prostitutes were not meant to loiter, they had to keep moving. And also, they were not meant to approach a gentleman. They had to wait to be approached. So when they are in a particular spot and they move, it's very convenient. So apparently every night you had hundreds of sex workers walking in circle around the church here. So that's why it was known as the Prostitute Church. Now, you think the extras on the film From Hell was a good filming set? Yeah, Johnny Depp actually went to the Ten Bells. I think he slept up there just to see the atmosphere. Anyway, time to tell you about my favorite victim. I do feel like we spend way too much time talking about the Ripper and not enough about its victim. So let me tell you a bit more about Katherine. Katherine Eddowes, she was probably a very interesting lady. She had a boyfriend, and she used to follow the executions. You know, until 1868, we still had public hangings, and it was a proper party. It was like a festival today. You'd bring the family, you'd bring the kids, and then you'd watch people be beheaded or hanged, drawn and quartered. And not anymore, but back in the days they were hanged and quartered as well. In Victorian times it was mainly hangings, and you'd drink a lot of alcohol, and often people wanted to buy a little souvenir as well. About the alcohol, by the way, it's very much debatable, but some believe that it's how we got the expression to be hangover, the day after the hangings. Because when you woke up after the hangings, you felt a bit dry the day after, so you might be hangover. Some say it's not the case. Some say it's because of the ropes we've mentioned earlier, that when you slept on the ropes for 2 penny, the morning after you felt very hangover. Who knows? But yeah, a big party, and it was a lot of money. People wanted to cash in on those executions, and that's exactly what Katherine did. She was writing poetry, like little snippets, like pretending to be the speech of the last prisoner. And then she'd be telling her poetry out loud on the streets, like some kind of like a Victorian street stand-up comedian. And then she'd sell little prints, little chapbooks as a souvenir of the execution. So she probably would have been quite fun, but she's also fallen on hard times, and she started drinking very heavily. The day of her passing, she had just come back from Kent, where she was with her boyfriend hop picking. But it was a bad season for the crops, and there was not much to pick, so they had walked back from Kent. They were penniless, the both of them. So she actually left her boyfriend. She told him that she was gonna go into Bermondsey to beg her daughter for money. We know that didn't happen because her daughter didn't want anything to do with her mother anymore, so she had actually given her a wrong address. We don't know where she's been, but she must have met someone she knew, because a couple of hours later she was arrested down there. She was found on the street completely drunk. She was on the floor making animals noises. We've all been there, right? And she was taken to Bishopgate police station. When she got to the station, they asked for her name and address. And she said nothing. So they put nothing into a cell. She slept for a couple of hours. And when she woke up, she was annoying. She was singing and she was annoying the police officers. And she was like, when are you going to let me go? And they said, we'll let you go when you can take care of yourself. She's like, I can do that right now. They're like, okay, we'll let you go if you can give us your name and address. And she said, my name is Mary Ann Kelly, and I live at 6 Fashion Street. Now, her name was Katherine Eddowes, and she didn't have an address. Fashion Street, we've been earlier, you might remember. Now, Mary Ann Kelly, that sounds very similar to Mary Jane Kelly, the 5th victim. So she was released from the police station, and it's because of that name that she gave them. So she said, Mary Ann Kelly. They let her go, and she said, have a good night, you old cock. And then she was back on the street. There's no way she could have been sober by then. When you're like on the pavement a few hours earlier making noises. But yes, some say that because she gave that name to the police, they might have been confused and she might have been targeted by mistake and the police might have been involved. Now, personally, I'm not convinced because when you use an alias, you use it a lot. Like, I actually use Kelly myself. You know, if I go on a dodgy website, I don't want to put my name, I'll put Kelly. But I always put the same because I want to remember what my alias is. So because she gave that name to the police doesn't mean that she gave it only to the police. Anyway, PC Edmund Watkins was on patrol that night. We are now on the infamous Myrtle Square. The buildings, of course, are very new, but the geography of the square has not changed too much. And at the time, it was full of warehouses. We're quite close to the docks, but the St. Catherine's docks, they were receiving a lot of fancy goods, expensive stuff, you know, like tobacco, wines, so stuff that would require police presence to check that there was no theft. And PC Edmund Watkins, he came at 1:30 a.m. He came from this way here with his little lantern. The streets would have been extremely dark at the time. So he walked down here with his lantern, nothing out of the ordinary, right down here, and he took a right here, 1:30 a.m. Now, 5 minutes later, according to one eyewitness, they think they saw Katherine at the corner of the street here talking to a gentleman. 1:45. So we're talking 15 minutes later, or just about 8 minutes from the sighting, PC Edmund Watkins comes back exactly the same way with his lantern. When he spotted a big pile of rags on the floor, got a bit closer, he realized it was not a pile of rags but a drunken lady, got a bit closer, and he realized it was not a drunken lady but it was the horribly mutilated body of Katherine Eddowes. She's the only one that has a plaque. She had been brutally attacked. She was also dissembled. Not only had he cut her body open, but he had cut off the nose, cut off little triangles on her face, and she was missing her kidney and her uterus. Now remember, the police received half a kidney, and did he want the kidneys though? You know, people say, oh, it's been very well done, he was probably a surgeon. Well, did he want the uterus or did he want 2 kidneys? We don't even know what he wanted, you know. So yes, I mean, to be honest, if you asked me to open my tummy and take my kidney, I would never find my kidney. So yes, he probably had some type of basis of anatomy, especially to do it very quickly in like 8 minutes in the dark like this. But would he have to be a surgeon? I'm not sure. And yes, so that was the end of Katherine. And time to tell you about my favorite suspect. So my suspect is a chap called Tumblety. I'll show you his photograph. There he is. So Tumblety was a quack. He was what we call a quack. There's no other term. He had trying to frame myself this way. He had already killed a few people in Liverpool. Okay, let's move his photo away. He had already killed a few. He was selling some bad medicine, claiming that it came from Native Americans, and he was known in Liverpool as the Great American Doctor. Now, the reason why is my favorite is that because he went back to America. And we know now, so he was from Rochester in the state of New York. And remember, there were a few copycats there as well. Not in Rochester, but in New York. And he lived another, I think, 15 years. But we know now that the serial killers, they don't just stop. So he's got an excuse to have stopped here. It's like going back. The police at the time, they tried to extradite him, ready saying he was gay. Well, yes. He was probably gay, although, he had been arrested a couple of days before the murder for what they called gruesome indecency with 5 guys. So yeah, in the terms of the day, it was clearly homosexuality. And when you ask a profiler, they'd tell you it's really rare that a gay serial killer would attack women. Yes, true. But he had been married once, and according to his wife, he used to go and see the sex workers anyway. He also very probably suffered from some kind of penile dysfunction. We know now that it's also quite often the case with serial killers. And he used to sell some pornography in Rochester. I don't want to see Victorian pornography, but yeah. And so he went back to America. He kept working as a quack, a fake doctor, and he had a lot of actual doctors in his friends, and they claimed that they had been invited to his basement when he proudly showed them a collection of uteruses. Now remember, most of the victims were missing their uterus. Remember, there was an American doctor that had tried to get some uteruses out of the hospital. And I know with our sensibility of today, it's really weird to be keeping uteruses. At the time, it wasn't that weird. It was weird, but not that weird for a physician to be keeping body parts. But was he studying? We have some reason to believe that he might have tried to work with illegal abortions. There was big money at the time. So was he studying uteruses? Was he into the reproductive system? Was it just a perv? We don't know. But that's why he's my favorite. Plus a little detail. Have I got my uncles out? No. Are we talking to me, or did anyone say anything about their uncles? No, I've got socks on. So yeah, when he died many years later in Rochester, they found in his possession a lot of lovely items and jewelry. He was quite wealthy, he made a lot of money. But he had on his fingers 2 little fake rings, identical or very similar at least to the ones missing on Annie Chapman's body. And we know now that the serial killers, they often take a little trophy, don't they? A little souvenir. So that's why he's my favorite. But again, I have no clue. I don't think we will ever know. They have a lot of this full list of long, very good suspects, and even the little rings, it might have been exaggerated, or it's we will never know really. But he's my favorite with Klosowski. George Chapman, I think, is also a good one. Anyway, it's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know if you have any questions before we go. If not, thank you for coming tonight. If any of you were completely new to me, hope I got you hooked and you'll come back for the next lives. On Tuesday, I'm taking you to Abney Park and Stoke Newington. So that's a tour we didn't do forever because they were doing some big refurb in the cemetery. So it should be all ready now. So Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. UK time. And we'll have a little murder mystery as well. Or maybe a big miscarriage of justice. It depends how you see the things. Cool. I think I've lost the chat again. Lovely. Uh, anyway, if any of you dropped me a little coffee, there we go. If any of you dropped me a little coffee on Buy Me a Coffee or a little tip on PayPal, thank you very much in advance. It's really thanks to your tips that I can keep doing those tours and doing more research and creating more. Thanks, Lethargy. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Pauline. And thank you very much for coming to spend this time with me again. And hopefully I'll see some of you on Tuesday. If not, next Sunday, about the same time as this one, maybe a little bit earlier, an hour earlier, I think, we're going back to Charing Cross. So again, dark tales, murders, and ghosts. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Rose. Thanks, How YouTube. And what are we doing after that? So Charing Cross. Oh, Godalming. So Tuesday, not the next one, the one after, we're going to Surrey. So we'll talk about 2 Victorian murders as well. And it's, well, I've never actually been, so I'll be, I've done my homework, but I'll be there all day trying to find the best route and double checking the signal. But yeah, it should be quite cool. I don't want to pay the ticket twice because it's a bit expensive to go there, so I'll go there very early to find the best route. And and Notting Hill. So the Sunday after that, I'm taking you to Notting Hill. I know some of you wanted to go there, so that should be fun as well. And thank you ever so much, Pauline. Cool. I don't see any questions. Let me double check. Cool. Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening, a great morning, a great lunch, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.